Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code was first introduced in June of 2016, and since then we've had this House pass 3 amendment bills, and this is the 4th round of amendments that we are bringing into the bill, into the code. And I have had an occasion to speak on every opportunity, and we are learning as we are going along. We are learning, we are responding to court decisions, we are responding to market conditions, and it is in the nature of this code that this will be continuously under review, and therefore there is nothing extraordinary about the amendments that we are discussing today. So my comments are going to be threefold. First, there is a particular clause in the bill which invites special comment. This bill, when the ordinance was issued, it was referred to a standing committee. The Standing Committee on Finance is a star-studded committee. It is headed by a former Minister of State for Finance. It has the former Finance Minister and Prime Minister as a member. It has many distinguished members as members of the Standing Committee on Finance. In fact, the only one who is missing from the Standing Committee on Finance is the man who wishes to be Finance Minister, who will be unnamed. Now, sir, there are a number of dissent notes in this report of the Standing Committee. However, there is one recommendation of the Standing Committee which is unanimous. All members in the Standing Committee subscribe to this recommendation, but yet I find the Finance Minister has not accepted the combined and collective wisdom of the Standing Committee. And this refers, sir, to clause 5B2A. In simple language, what it means is that if a company is under examination by the resolution professional, the resolution professional can dictate that companies will continue to supply goods and services to this company that is being restructured. So the casualty of this clause are going to be MSME companies. Medium, small, and micro, medium, and small enterprises are now being mandated by law to continue supplying goods and services to a bankrupt company where the risk of default is very high. So the Standing Committee had made an examination of this clause and had unanimously recommended that this clause be deleted, because this clause interferes with a contractual relationship between a supplier and the debtor company. And there are no safeguards provided in the bill to protect the interests of these vendors and suppliers who are usually MSME companies. So my request to the Honorable Finance Minister is to revisit this clause 5B2A, and if need be, introduce safeguards at a later stage to ensure that the risk of default of the supplier companies is eliminated. You are now eliminating the risk for the debtor companies. You want the IBC to look good. You want to get good value after liquidation. And those are laudable objectives. But in that process, you should not sacrifice the interest of MSME vendors. And I would request the Honorable Finance Minister, like such codes in other countries have safeguards to protect the interests of the vendors, we also should introduce these safeguards, preferably in law, if not in the main act, at least certainly in the delegated legislation. So, my second point relates to the MSME sector. Now, on every occasion that I have spoken, I have highlighted the fact that we need a special regime for the MSME sectors. You cannot treat the MSME sector on par with the big corporates for whom the IBC is really meant. And the basic point is that the MSME becomes sick, not because of any willful default, but because of competitive pressures, because of family problems, because of cash flow problems, and most importantly, because of delayed payments. And this is an endemic problem in India. over 40% of the sickness in the MSME sector, sir, is attributable to delayed payments. And these are payments made by big companies, payments made by public sector companies, payments made by government companies. Now, last year, in June of 2019, the Reserve Bank of India had set up an expert committee on the MSME sector under the chairmanship of Sri UK Sinha, a very distinguished former chairman of SEBI. This committee submitted its report, and I invite the finance minister's attention to the recommendations made by this expert committee of the RBI. Now, this calls for amendments not to the IBC, but it calls for amendments to the MSME Act 2006. And I have made this point earlier, and I wish to reiterate that, sir, we need a special IBC treatment for the MSME sector. The recommendations that have been made by the UK Sinha Committee, which said that the IBC provides for a differentiated regime for insolvency and bankruptcy of firms, proprietary firms, and individuals. Delegated legislation and rules in this regard are under consideration. The finalization of these rules can boost lender confidence. So the most important step that the government has to take is to ensure that every MSME uploads its invoices. If information is not available on accounts receivable, then the MSME is not going to benefit. Today, under the IBC, firms are obligated through an information utility to make information on accounts receivable in the public domain so that you know for this company that is defaulting how much money is owed to which company. This regime does not exist for the MSME sector. This calls for an amendment to the MSME Act, and I think that every MSME which has an accounts receivable in excess of, say, 1 crore should mandatorily upload its invoices so that it is in a position to invoke the clause of the IBC, because as the Honorable Finance Minister knows, most MSMEs in our country are basically come into the category of operational creditors. And you have given priority to secured creditors, financial creditors, and you have treated operational creditors on a different footing. And because the MSME sector is so crucial for employment, for exports, and for balanced regional development, I think we need to revisit the IBC from the point of view of the MSME sector, and this would call for amendments not so much in the IBC itself, but in the MSME Act of 2006. So finally, let me come to the IBC itself. We've had 4 years of the IBC, and the question that can naturally be asked is what has been the impact so far? So first of all, I'd like to congratulate the IBBI, the Insolvency Board, Bankruptcy Board of India, for bringing out a quarterly newsletter, which is on the website, which is called Insolvency and Bankruptcy News. It's a very detailed newsletter, and anybody can access it, and it contains a wealth of information on what exactly is happening to the implementation of the IBC. So, when you look at the numbers that have been put by the IBBI itself in the public domain, let's go through some of these numbers. There have been 3,312 cases that have been referred to the IBC so far. So, out of these 3,312 cases, 970 cases have been closed under the IBC. 970 have been closed. Out of these 970 cases that have been closed, 780 have been liquidated, which means the mortality rate is 80%. So, Madam Finance Minister, when the IBBI says that our first objective is saving life, having a mortality rate of 80% is not saving life. Having a mortality rate of 80% is euthanasia. is actually putting to death a lot of companies. And as I will explain to you later, the employment implications of this are quite frightening and quite staggering itself. So the second point that comes out from the numbers that are available on the website is that, and this the government has taken credit for in various forums, that the claims that have been admitted so far under the resolution category are 3,51,000 crores. They have realized 1,50,000 crores. The recovery is 43%, or to use the language of the bankers, the haircut is only 57%. Not a bad average. When you have 43% of your hair remaining, you are still not completely bald. Your haircut is only 57%. But sir, these figures you have to examine these figures much more carefully. If you remove 7 companies, Electro Steel, Bhushan Steel, Monet Ispat, SR Steel, Alok Industries, Bhushan Power and Steel, and Jyoti Structures. Remove these 7 big defaulting companies, the figure that comes is that the total amount that you have realized is only 10%. In other words, the haircut is 90%. So while the big cases have to be pursued, I think the Honorable Finance Minister is perfectly well aware of the fact that if you exclude these big cases, the IBC recovery is only 10%. I think this is a very low rate of recovery. It is certainly better than 0%. That I admit. That in the previous regime, you were not recovering anything. You were allowing things to drag on. But the fact is, we are nowhere close to recovering 40% or 50%. If you remove these big, high-profile companies, the recovery rate is only 10%. And I think that is a matter of great concern. Now, I'm finishing. When the companies go into liquidation, there are 780 companies that have gone into liquidation. And if you look at the data that is available on the website, a large number of these liquidation cases have been taken up, and 51 of these liquidations have reached final stage.
Mr. Jairam Ramesh.
Now,
one minute.
1 minute, sir.
No, please. The time earlier decided was 2 hours, and now it's only 1 hour. So kindly please conclude.
1 minute, I'm finishing. Now, if you take the liquidations, the claims are 9,008.
The timing are according to the earlier times.
Yeah.
So don't go by the board. Unless you make it clear, everybody will be misled. Yeah.
So
the chairman himself told that earlier it was 2 hours and now it's only 1 hour. So the time that is displayed has to be corrected according to the new time. Okay.
So I'm finishing.
Please.
So only 51 liquidations have reached the final stage. Now, the claims for these 51 liquidations are 9,870 crores. The creditors have received only 96 crores. That means the recovery is just 1%. So the basic point I'm making is that IBC is a transformational piece of legislation. It's a huge step forward. 4 years later, it is work in progress. But the recovery rates that we are seeing are nowhere the recovery rates that we hoped they would be. And I think we need to understand the reasons why these recovery rates are low. We need to pay further attention to legal changes, to changes in the way the NCLT operates, in the way the IBC itself operates. And I think the ultimate objective of the IBC is, in fact, to improve the recovery rates. But if the recovery rates are as they are, then I'm afraid we cannot say that the IBC has been a success.
Thank you.
So I'll finish, sir. I'm finishing.
See, the time is exceeding.
I'm finishing. So I never take more time. I'm just finishing. You're taking more time asking me to finish. I'm finishing. So I think in the interests of the IBC itself, I request the Honorable Finance Minister to revisit the IBC in its relationship to the MSME sector.
Yes.
I request the Honorable Finance Minister to look at the recovery rates so that the recovery rates are at least in the region of 40 to 50%, which they certainly are not in today's circumstances. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.